Oh hey, I didn't see you there. You caught me just honing one of my knives here at the shop. Today I thought it'd be a great topic to touch on is one of the most frequently asked questions I get asked here at the shop, which is how frequently should I sharpen my knives? So this can be a bit of a difficult question to answer because everyone's usage habits when they're using their knives are different. It could depend on the cutting board that you're using, how aggressive you use your knife, what kind of things you're chopping, and how frequently you're using your knife. So I thought we'd start by answering this question by talking about the difference between sharpening your knife and honing your knife. So honing your knife is the process of realigning an existing edge. Over time, as we chop with our knife, the edge of the knife is going to fold over from one side or to the other, making the knife feel not so great, not very sharp. So what we need to do is run it along a honing rod such as this, or a very high grit whetstone in the range of say 3,000 and upwards to realign our edge, make it feel sharp again. Over time though, as we continue to do this, fold the steel over through use and then realign, it's going to start to round off as little bits of steel start to break away. When we have a rounded edge like this, no amount of honing is going to bring your knife back to life. So we need to actually remove material from the sides of our knife to create a new edge, which we will then refine using progressively finer and finer whetstones. Now, sharpening is the process, as I said, of actually removing steel from your knife and creating a new edge. This is necessary over time, like I said, as your knife's edge becomes rounded. The only downfall to sharpening your knife is that you are removing steel from your knife, which is going to shorten the height of the knife, and if we continue to do this a lot, we're going to wear away our entire knife. This is an inevitability for any knife. Knives don't typically last more than 20 years if you're sharpening them all the time. This will get smaller and smaller and smaller. We can continue to use it, but it's just not going to be the same knife over time. So, with that said, it's important to try to keep our knife as sharp as possible with removing as little material as possible to help prolong the life of our knife. So I recommend, and what I did when I was cooking professionally, was hone my knife every day on high grit whetstones in the range of like 5,000 to 8,000 and then touch it on a leather strop. This meant that I was spending as little time as possible on each knife honing it. I was removing very little material and my knives were razor sharp all the time. Now, of course, if you're a home cook, you might not need to hone your knife that frequently. If you're using it for say 20-30 minutes a day, maybe honing your knife once a week will suffice. Me in a professional setting, I'm using my knife for 4 to 5 hours of straight chopping every day, so that could equate to you to like a week's worth of use. That's pretty good. Where do I want to go now? So I also want to talk about the distinction between using a honing rod and honing your knife on a high grit whetstone. In my mind, it's much easier to be inconsistent on one of these honing rods, which is why I recommend honing on a whetstone as much as possible. Now, getting a whetstone out, getting it soaked, and having the space to use it and the time to do it isn't always possible. And that's where the honing rod really is a great tool. If you're in the middle of service, in the middle of your prep day, and you just need to quickly bring the edge of your knife back to life, a honing rod is a great tool to have. We recommend using a ceramic honing rod. They're much better for your knives, especially for the Japanese knives with those more refined and fine edges on them. Okay, we're going to finish off the video by talking about some tips and tricks that you can use to keep your knives sharp for longer. So in addition to what we've already talked about, honing your knife as frequently as possible, some things that you can avoid when using your knife are scraping the knife across the board with the cutting edge. What you should do is flip the knife over and use the spine to scrape ingredients across the board. Of course, if we're scraping the edge of the knife across the board, we're causing it to fold over like we talked about, which is going to make it not feel so great. Okay, we're going to finish off this video by talking about some tips and tricks that you can use to keep your knife as sharp as possible for as long as possible. So in addition to honing your knife as frequently as possible, like we already talked about, you're going to avoid scraping the edge of the knife across the cutting board. This is going to cause the edge to roll over, which we already know is not good for the knife. Instead, flip the knife over and use the spine of the knife to scrape things across your cutting board. Does the exact same thing, but doesn't dull the edge of your knife. The cutting board is also super important. Having a good high quality cutting board, ideally an end grain cutting board made from hardwood or a semi hardwood, is also super important. These end grain cutting boards, all the grains of the wood are standing straight up, and our knife is going to fit in between those little grains, keeping it sharp for much longer. And then the last few points we'll make are just the general points. Stay away from bones, frozen foods, nuts, hard candies, shells, anything that you think could be damaging to the knife. The general rule of thumb is if you wouldn't bite through it with your teeth, you shouldn't cut it with your knife. If you're just cutting veggies, fruits, proteins, you'll be totally fine. Of course, also when you're storing your knife, you want to be sure that it's stored in a way that the edge is not getting banged into other things. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but you don't want to have your knife rummaging around in a drawer, getting banged up and nicked and hitting into other things, which of course is going to damage and dull the knife. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's any tips and tricks that you have that we didn't include in this video, make sure to leave them down below so other people can learn and get better. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, share, subscribe to our channel for more knife-related content. And until the next video, stay sharp.